Welcome into another live edition of the Zoneheads podcast. I'm Brandon. He's Zach, and our episode today presented by Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in a home in Central Florida, you need a realtor who not only knows the market but has experience in protecting your investment. And that is our guy, Kevin Crager, Real Estate Made Smart. Call Kevin today. I'm going to put the number at the bottom of the screen, 407-702-4635. And as of last week, my big projects was that any of our partners on this show or on my live show in the Zone heard weekdays on 96.9 The Game, all of them can be found at zoneheadsmedia.com. So finally, one nice, neat place for you to find everything. You can find any podcast that I am on or we are on. You can find it there. Any clients that we are partnered with, you can find all of that. So support the people that support us, and we will continue to crank out this great content. I hope it's great, at least.
Look at this guy. He's grown up so much before our very eyes. I mean, from just a lowly board op button pusher to a guy that now has a full-blown media company, is fully entrenched as an Orlando talking head. It's a beautiful thing to see. And that's just starting the process of all the great things Brandon's doing. But yeah, man, it's awesome. The website looks fantastic. Obviously, again, the fuel to the engine is all the zone heads that listen and interact. And man, I find myself going back to that page even more and more. This month is like a really busy month for the zone heads, I think, because obviously you're getting close to the playoffs. We talked about how the Magic were kind of on a skid, so there's been a lot of emotions being shared. But you also had the Arnold Palmer the other day at Bay Hill last weekend, right? You have March Madness. It feels like there's a lot going on, and the Rays Stadium stuff has been hot. So it feels like March has been a really good month for the Zoneheads Facebook page.
Amen to that. And the thing that I love about the page and our listeners is that it's such a melting pot. There are people that cheer for all sorts of teams from across the country, most densely located in the Southeast, but still it's Orlando. It's Florida. It's a melting pot of fandom. And yet, yes, when things happen with the Orlando Magic, that page goes like just everybody venting frustrations or celebrating wins, which, by the way, the Magic were able to secure yesterday. Nice midday dub against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs had won 16 straight games. It was the longest winning streak in the NBA this season. The Magic snapped it. They did it on national television, which they have not won a game on national TV over the last 2 years. And I say it's really been longer than that, but the last 2 years have been the only 2 years in the last, say, 10 where the Magic were even allowed on national TV. So it's been even longer than that. You'd probably have to go back to when Dwight was in town to find the last time. I know, it's crazy. Now, non-playoff game. I'm talking a regular season game on one of the major networks, ESPN, ABC, TNT. I think you'd have to go back to about 2012 to find the last time the Magic won on national TV. That game, it was awesome. And the point differential going into that one against Cleveland, because they had played 2 times already this season, plus 51 in the favor of the Cavs. So a lot to celebrate yesterday.
You know what's crazy is, like, I saw that and my first thought was I was like, I'm just happy for Brandon and my peeps over in Orlando and the zone heads on Facebook that are going to be playing that pizza song or whatever y'all do when you get wins and get crazy.
You're blending two very very important pieces of the winning puzzle. There's a song, and then you get 50% off pizza at Papa John's.
When the Magic do what?
They win. But it's not a pizza song. It's just it's a song, and those are two separate things. There's a song, and then also separately you get 50% off your pizza today at Papa John's. Promo code Magic Win, by the way.
Those things happen in sequence as a combination, correct?
But it's not a pizza.
Can you ever have one without
You're spreading fake news, Zach.
Can you ever have one without the other?
No, technically not. There's the promo code.
Put it right there.
Not a pizza song. I'm not anti-pizza songs. I'm just, just trying to make sure you get what's going on.
We're trying to bring things together. You're trying to pull them apart right now, Brandon. It's the pizza song. And look, the more important part here is that there was pizza, there was songs, and there was winning for the Orlando Magic. And I know people were pumped about that. And as they should be. But for me, I thought it was a nice moment. I asked you, is it a springboard? Is it more than that? Is it the swagger coming back to the squad?
I hope so. Shout out to Jay Retcher, who also does some fantastic streaming work on these platforms. He hit us up here about the national broadcast and the dub. We appreciate it, Jay. I don't. I have a hard time going that far because at the end of the day, it is just one win. It feels like it could be bigger than that. But this team has had so many issues over the last 2 months, really dating back to pre-All-Star break. You could probably even go back to the start of January when things started to go south. So I'm not going to let this win create some sort of false confidence in my mind because they still put themselves in such a hole. They're going to have a really hard time getting out of the play-in. That seems virtually impossible at this point. So you are effectively playing for the opportunity to face Boston or Cleveland in the first round. So we can sit here and come up with all the platitudes we want about confidence and swagger and you feel good. And I'm not going to take away from any of that. But at the end of the day, the goal this season was to make it a step further than you made it last year. And that simply isn't going to happen. Prove me wrong, but you got to go up against Boston or Cleveland in round one. It's great that they went into Cleveland and got the win, but could they do that 4 times in a 7-game series? I'm still rolling with no on that. So bucket of cold water. Why'd you do that to me? Here I am in a good mood.
I just want to preface this since you said it the way you did. Before we jumped on, me and Brandon were texting about what we wanted to chat about today. And I was like, the Magic have their swagger back. And Brandon was like, yeah. So I thought you were going to have a much different opinion on it. I didn't know you were going to throw a cold bucket of water. But like you said, that's the beauty of sports that we get to still watch. And I've always said this in terms of, content creation. We give our opinions, right? And that's what anybody does in any sports chat, whether it's streaming or you're at the bar or talking to your family at a thing. But like at the end of the day, what you think is going to happen doesn't always go along with necessarily what you want to happen. So even though you might have that opinion, it doesn't mean that you don't die hard want the Magic to prove you wrong and win a bunch of games and that you're not going to be rooting for them to do so. So I always feel like it's important to point that out when it feels like it's a little negative, which it does, by the way.
Yeah, I understand. There's I think there's like 13 games left at this point.
Yeah.
If what I think this can do is springboard them to be an above 500 team over this little stretch of games, which will make you feel good going into the play-in. That'll still be fun to be a part of that because the Magic haven't yet been part of a play-in, and I really like that development that the NBA came up with. So you can be part of that. You can collect a big win. You can feel good. You are still going to face one of the 2 teams that is most likely going to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, and the team will hit a wall. You can feel good before that, but this isn't going to create any false hope in me that the Magic can beat one of those 2 teams the way that things are currently constructed. I think at the end of the day, hopefully what this does is you springboard into the postseason with some momentum. That momentum will likely be stalled by the better competition you face. And then you just go into the offseason feeling less negative. Zach, how many times have you experienced this in your career where a team that you cover and follow goes on a slide, there's some injuries, people start calling for the coach to be fired? It's always the same little rhythm to these storylines. And the negativity ends up louder than it really needs to be. The negativity around the Orlando Magic right now does not realistically correlate with where this team should be in the current moment. They were a year ahead of schedule last year, making it to the playoffs without needing a play-in. They were the 5 seed. That is not where they were in their growth. So really what's happening right now is what happens with all of us in life, which is you're trying to get better at something. All of a sudden you get a whole lot better than you expected. And then what happens 2 weeks later? You suck again. And then you get better. That's what the Magic are doing right now. It's the same trajectory as life. Would you be this hard on yourself, people? These are life lessons, Zach.
Yeah, and it's a great month to talk about basketball and play-ins and all kinds of stuff. I know we're going to spend the rest of the episode pretty much on March Madness and the tournament and some of the 1 seeds. Shout out to the Florida Gators. But before we get to any of that,
don't worry about that.
Before we get to any of that, got to give a little bit of love to the Tampa Bay Rays, making some headlines here with the stadium news. and I know you and I have been kind of chatting about it quite a bit and digging deep into it. I do have to, though, since this is the Zone Heads podcast, point out that there was a post that I've seen a few different times, and my wife even brought it up to me this morning when we were chatting. Not from the Zone Heads page, but
I was going to say, is Ariel a zone head? Let's get Ariel in the group.
she is, but through me. But what I would say is the first time I saw this content, this post was on the Zone Heads Facebook page, and it was the graphic comparing the Savannah Bananas selling out Raymond James Stadium right next to the Rays not selling out opening day at Legends Field or Steinbrenner Field now, which is where, the Yankees spring game is. I'm sure you've seen the graphic.
I'm very glad that you're bringing this up, because I'm not sure that I would have remembered to ask you, and it would have been one of those, I would have been kicking myself after we hit stop and stream that I didn't bring it up. I looked up Rays tickets just to see how accurate that was. I mean, obviously I saw the pictures with the Savannah Bananas. Somebody's going to have to explain to me why that product is so hot, but I looked up tickets just to see, could I get some? $39 a piece. Now, of course, all these ticketing sites end up slapping you with fees that end up costing just as much as the tickets themselves. So it wasn't as attractive as it seems, but still $39 for opening day in a limited capacity stadium outdoors. I'm a little surprised by that. I thought this was going to be a hotter ticket.
And the first thing I want to say is comparing the two things is apples and oranges. Like Savannah Bananas are a show that's in town once a year. If you're lucky, and here in Tampa Bay, we have been, shout out Rob Higgins and the Tampa Bay Sports Commission. They've been able to bring the Bananas to town for 3 straight seasons. And this year they were able to play in an NFL stadium, but that's only because the Trop was destroyed. They were actually going to play in St. Pete originally, but after the hurricanes, they had to pivot. It's the first time we've ever seen the Bananas in an NFL stadium. They packed the place. They sold it out. It was a lot of fun. I didn't go this year. I've been the last 2 seasons. I had to move some things around. I wasn't able to make it, obviously, but I had a lot of friends and folks that I know that did go and enjoyed themselves. My point, though, being that it's such a different situation to compare. And listen, the Rays not selling out opening day at Steinbrenner Field yet is an issue. I just think they're such separate conversations. Like, it is, again, a once a year type of event. Supply and demand is the easiest thing. And I'm not good with economics. I failed it twice in college. But I know that. I know supply and demand. And then on top of it, you talk about a melting pot of people. How about a melting pot of people at Savannah Banana games? Like, you don't have to be a diehard, banana or party animals fan. You're going for the event. So it's just so different. So when they show the two things side by side, I just don't think they have any correlation, if any correlation with each other. Now, it is pretty sad that the Rays haven't sold out opening day, and that surprises even me. However, I say that with the caveat of, even months ago, when they announced we're going to be playing in Tampa, and you had all these people on social media, all these baseball fans and folks that have probably never even been to the Trop saying, wait until they sell out every game. Fans are going to be rabid for it. And I said, we'll see. And I knew I didn't have any conversations with the Rays, but I know that organization so well that there's moments where I know what they're thinking just because I know them. When they agreed to play in Tampa, they wouldn't have done that if they thought it was going to make them look bad for not always being on the Tampa side. I think, and I said this again months ago, when the Rays locked in playing in Tampa this season, they did it as you're going to see that fans aren't going to show up in Tampa just like they don't in St. Pete. And it's not an issue of what side of the bridge it's on. Now, I thought they would start hot and it would tail off. And then you're talking about hot summer games, open air, nobody wants to go to them. The fact that opening day hasn't sold out is amazing to me. And not in a good way. So
okay, I have a follow-up question here, because I think the obvious move is to bag on Tampa as a sports town.
And I'm not doing that. That wasn't.
Oh no, I'm trying to understand the core of the problem here, because when I look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, I don't look at a team that struggles for fan support. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers would probably be, in my opinion, without looking at the numbers, middle of the road when it comes to the NFL. I don't think they'd be at the very bottom, but they've had a lot of successful years, and it's a pretty good fan base. It's also the NFL, so it's
mainly that part. It's the NFL.
So I look at the Tampa Bay Lightning as having one of the better fan bases in hockey. I look at the Bucs as having maybe middle of the road in the NFL, which is still pretty good. This is all the same city. So why is it that, am I correct, by the way, in that assessment? And why is there this divide between all these sports. You would think if you are a town that supports a sports team, you would just support all of them. And it doesn't seem like that's the case. The Rays get, they get the scraps, the sports fans and the support in the town.
It's obviously nuanced. I've obviously had this type of chat so many times over the years. I can't even keep track of it. I couldn't tell you. What I do know, though, is, again, similarly, let's start with the hockey side of it, apples and oranges. Amalie Arena, which is where the Bolts play, holds less people, and they have less games per year. So, yeah, it's going to – them having a sellout every game throughout the course of the season, overall, they're still going to have less people walking in and out of the building than the Rays even do at the Trop through 81 games. It just, the math doesn't work out that way. So it is apples and oranges. And the Lightning, they've won multiple Stanley Cups. They've, sustained success. And there's a lot that they do well. It's a great fan appreciation, and it's reciprocated by ownership. I think that the connection between those two is so much more cohesive. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot the Rays can and know that they can learn from the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I don't think it's as cut and dry as like the Lightning have it all right and the Rays have it all wrong. There's a lot of other factors that benefit hockey versus baseball. And again, I think having an established stadium where people aren't always trying to figure out if it's going to move, where it's going to be, it's easier to be loyal when you know somebody's not going to leave anytime soon. And that's always been an issue with the Rays as well. But again, I do think, fan connection and those things do play a factor. Don't get me wrong. And this is one of the other things I've just said this is the least factual opinion I have on the Rays stadium situation in regards to like the Lightning and the Bucks and the other local teams. Shout out to the Rowdies too, soccer side, in the Tampa Bay Sun, newer women's professional organization soccer team here. But Brandon, I don't know why, but like talking to sports fans in Tampa Bay for let's just say the last decade, even though I could go back longer than that, for some reason, people have a much harder time in Tampa Bay shedding their baseball affiliations than they do their other sports. So
that's one of the big concerns here if the Rays were to somehow mosey on over to Central Florida.
Well, and obviously you understand what I'm saying, but just to elaborate on that specific point, I will meet people that are from New York. They're everywhere, right? I'll meet people from New York that have converted to being a Lightning fan, that have started to root for the Buccaneers, if not converted altogether, but that diehard are Yankees fans or Mets fans. And it's wild that they're willing, and I'm using New York as an example, but I could say the same thing about Boston people that live down in Tampa Bay. We'll say Chicago, Pittsburgh, where my family is from. Like, for whatever reason, it seems like the hardest shedding comes from the baseball side for people. And it just, I don't know why. I think that's a separate conversation. But I've met a lot of transplant fans that have converted in the other sports that don't in baseball. And I do think, again, there's a lot that the Rays need to fix. And I think being on the Tampa side might help that. But at the end of the day, for whatever reason, fans convert that are transplants a lot easier to hockey and football for whatever reason here than they do baseball.
Ownership would probably be tier one of that discussion. And then tier two is that the Rays games haven't felt like true baseball games comparatively. If you've been to a Yankee game or a Red Sox game or an Orioles game in their stadiums, it doesn't feel the same at all. And I think that so it is tough because you go, okay, I'm going to go there. I don't think you get sucked in. If you're a Yankee fan that's experienced that, there's not enough going on at the Trop, the artist formerly known as the Trop, to pull you away from that completely. So before we pivot, because I do want to talk some NCAA tournament stuff with you. The people on my side of town got very excited when the stadium deal fell through. And our Orlando Dreamers folks stepped up and said, we have a buyer. We have somebody that is willing to buy the team and move them over here. I set the percentage completely arbitrary. There's nothing behind this, but just my opinion. 7.5% as the percentage chance that Orlando lands this baseball team. What do you think about that? What's the conversation on the what? That. Well, but now that it seems like Stu is going to be, I think Stu is going to be pressured to sell the team. It's just a matter of who he sells it to, and why can't it be somebody here?
First of all, and we'll get to that point. I said that weeks ago when we.
Why do you think I got that opinion from? Yeah.
I know. I'm not saying it like I said it. I'm just saying, like, to me, the stadium deal falling apart is just on track with everything we've been talking about. it made news because it was A, official, and B, got outside of these chats that are just happening locally to a national scale. That's why it was a big deal when it fell through. But again, we knew Stu wasn't going to pay the side of what he owed for St. Pete's new stadium by the end of the month. So I do think he's going to be pressured into selling. I think it's already kind of happened, to be honest with you. But I mean, again, officially, I haven't seen signed paperwork, so I can't say 100%. That being said, I don't see a scenario where he's able to own the team much longer, if long at all, from here, because they have to figure out a new stadium plan and neither side wants to work with him. MLB's tired of him. Like, he's going to get forced into a corner. And again, he's going to make billions of dollars when he sells it. So, like, don't feel bad for the guy. But yeah, clearly we're in a spot now where, like, it seems like we're inevitably in a place where he's going to have to sell. That being said, a lot of the local conversation is that, like, there are not just one but multiple groups that are not just willing to buy it, that have already put in offers, that are already willing to move forward, that already have plans. And that's my knowledge of it too. So for me, I'm uber focused on that because, as far as I know, that's the plan. That's what's probably going to happen, if not already behind the scenes happening. However, I don't think, and I've said this to you a million times, specifically with Orlando, I don't think Major League Baseball would ever green light the Rays moving to Orlando, because I think all the issues from the MLB's perspective, regardless of what you or I think, I do tend to agree with them, but regardless of our opinions, I think Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred look at Orlando and they're like, they're just going to have the same issues in Orlando that existed in Tampa Bay. Again, that's not saying that's our opinions or your opinions in Orlando or here in Tampa. I'm just saying that's what I think Manfred in the MLB sees in that type of move. However, money talks. And if you're able to build a stadium and that's close enough where the Rays can kind of figure it out in the meantime, and maybe you do keep some of that fan base, I don't know. I mean, if Barry Larkin really has $1 billion buyer somewhere and a place to build it, yeah, that would change the game. But Brandon, there ain't no way. I had this argument with family and friends members this week, and I was like, is Brandon Kravitz texting you guys to, like, get under my skin? They're like, Barry Larkin said he has $1 billion. I'm like,
Yeah.
love Barry. Nobody has $1 billion in a place to build in Orlando, or we would already, like, that would have already been on the table. Like, that's not.
No, they have.
No.
Yes, they do.
I don't buy it.
They have renderings.
Yeah, render this.
Okay, let's render a conversation about the NCAA tournament. The brackets are out. I watched the Florida Gators won the SEC tournament. They ran away with that bad boy. Smashed Alabama. Smashed Tennessee. I'm going to save my ultimate opinion on the Florida Gators until the very tail end of the episode, because I got a bet on a little something going with them. And a couple of others. I've already placed some first round bets, but I was watching the bracketology broadcast on CBS last night. They do such a good job with that. Let me put it to you this way to launch us into this discussion. What is your first move? When that bracket comes out or they're releasing that thing live on TV, what's the first thing you do? Are you trying to pluck out the upsets? Do you go into research mode? Do you just dive into the bracket and go, let me see where my gut takes me? What's the first move from Zach Blobner once that bracket starts coming out?
It's the very last part of what you said. I go gut through the bracket and I just pick. I don't think. I just pick who I think. Or I mean, I pick who comes to my mind right away. I'm not like overanalyzing, because I think for years I would do a lot of overanalyzing. I'd be one of the last folks to get my brackets in. And so, like, I kind of got away from that because I realized it wasn't necessarily helping or hurting me ultimately. And I was just wasting time and, like, driving myself crazy. So what I'll typically do is I'll fill it out right away. And then over the course of the next day and a half, I'll go back and I'll probably change maybe 2 to 5 picks into different things, just as I've done a little bit more research. But I really do like to trust my gut. And I think for me, a big part of that is, like, I love college hoops. Like, I watch a good amount of the year, and not just the Gators. Like, I'll watch other games in other conferences. Even in the winter time when we're talking about the Bahamas tournament. I went to Disney for the other tournament the Gators won this year. Like, I'll go check out all kinds of hoops all year long. So for me, I don't feel like lost when the brackets come out. I have a sense of who I like and who I don't. So I just kind of fill it out from scratch, Brandon. And again, then I'll kind of go back within the next day and a half and tinker a little bit. And that's I'm also a big have your, like, main bracket person, and you can only talk about and brag about that. I will fill out
Yeah.
multiple brackets. I will, but I
But
won't
you
talk
only
about
have one. You have one discussable bracket. I think that's
100%.
the. I am a
100%.
big believer in bracket monogamy.
Yep.
You
Agreed.
cannot, if you at any point say in a conversation, well, in my other bracket,
Yeah, you can't
I
do
have
that.
tuned you out.
Yeah.
You are lucky if I'm listening to your first one. Now you're going to
Yeah.
bring me a second one. I
Yeah.
already have my own to worry about, and the
Yep.
bets game to game. Like I can't be worrying about your second and
Yep.
third bracket. So I think it's and it's not me not caring about listening to somebody else and what they've got going on. There's only so much room upstairs, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it just it comes down to common decency. I'm a little bit like you in that I do want to gut feel it, but I don't watch as much college basketball throughout the season. So me gut playing this is really just a fancy word for guessing. Um, outside, I know who the good teams are, and I've watched them, but in terms of like the upsets and the darlings and stuff like that, and trying to pluck that out, I'm not just when I first started doing this however long ago it was when I filled out my first bracket, that was exactly what I would do. I'd go, oh, look, a 13 seed. I bet they look like they could be a Cinderella with no basis of knowledge whatsoever. I'm putting significantly more time and effort into that. I actually have, before we hopped on, I spent the last hour watching the playoff between Rory and JJ Spawn. Shout out to
So
Rory
cool.
for taking home the win. Can we get every golf tournament to wrap up on a Monday morning,
It's
by the
so
way? How
great.
awesome was that?
It's so great. And I
Yeah.
love their 3-hole playoff system. I was there, not real quick. I was there the first year they did that. I was working in Jacksonville. I covered the TPC every year at Sawgrass. And I was there the first year that happened, and Ricky Fowler ended up winning it. And it was one of the coolest experiences I've ever been a part of. And that wasn't next day because they played on time. There was no weather issues. So they did the playoff right after. But it was, man, it was one of the most electric atmospheres like that didn't have like a Jordan or a LeBron or a Tiger, right? Like if you have a superstar, it's always going to be crazy. But it was one of the most crazy environments that I've ever been in that wasn't already just because of the scale of the event or the player up there. But shout out to Rory. That was an awesome win for him.
Do you think they charged for tickets this morning?
I don't know if they charged, but they did have separate tickets because I had a buddy that decided to drive across I-4 to go today. And he's
Oh,
like,
wow.
he said, my boss gave me his ticket. So I don't know if that was like the tickets for Sunday and they credited it them. I think that's what happens. I think if you had a ticket for Sunday, you got credited for Monday, but I'm not positive. But I know that you do have to have a ticket. It is ticketed to get in for the next day playoff.
So back to the bracket.
Yeah.
What I did today, so as I was doing that, I went through, and I've done this every year for the last 3 years. I will focus about 2 to 5 minutes of my attention on every single team, and I will create a sheet, a Word doc on all
Okay.
68 teams in the NCAA tournament to at least have some level of understanding of what have you done this season? Who are your best players? Who's your coach if it's relevant? Because coaching matters a lot this time of year. What have you done recently? How'd you play in the tournament? It's like very basic kind of stuff. And that gives me a better understanding of who am I buying into. Do you rebound well? Do you shoot the three well? I'm not looking up every single one of these statistics, but there are enough websites that you can pull from that spit all this stuff out to you. And then I sort of curate that and create my own list. And so that is how I start to develop who I like. And I also read the market. So that's what I just said to you is actually the second thing that I do. The first thing I do is I look at the lines that pop up. And it was about an hour after the bracket was released. You had lines on all of these games, and I am quickly looking at what lines to me look shorter than what the seed difference. If you have a 3 versus a 14 and the spread is only 5, okay, that one gets circled. What exactly do I need to understand about this double-digit seed where they might be able to get this win because the spread is tight? So that is actually how I came up with my very first darling of the tournament, was through exactly that. And that was VCU, who opened as plus 3.5. VCU was plus 3.5 when they opened against BYU. BYU is the 6th
against the Cougs.
There you go.
Yes, good call, BK.
Very
I'll
quick.
give you, that's on my list. I'll give you a
Thank
golf
you.
chair for that.
Very quickly, that line went from +3.5 to +2.5. So some sharp
Yep.
action immediately coming in on VCU. I got it right in the middle at +3, and I
Nice.
will have them winning the game as far as the bracket goes, because you got to be bold with the. Just because you, by the way, just because you take a team that's an underdog to win in your bracket, that doesn't mean that you don't have to just take the points when you bet on them. These should be two separate psychologies. You have to be bold with your bracket, otherwise you have no chance in a bracket contest, but doesn't mean you need to lay all of your cheddar on these money line underdogs. So VCU will be one of my first ones. I think BYU is a little overrated with they shoot the three well, but if you can shut that down, we saw how that went for them in the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
where I
great
start.
pick.
So that's the general process for me, and it's a little psychotic, but
Yeah, that's a lot. I think that's closer to what I used to do, and then I was like, "What am I doing?" It just felt like a
yeah,
lot.
I,
But
I
hey,
can say
look,
this does not lead to guaranteed success by any means, but it just makes me feel better about the overall
yeah,
process. But for you, it makes sense. You're watching, and my co-host in the afternoons, Tyler Karen, he is obsessed with college basketball. You guys can fill out gut
yeah.
brackets that actually layer in intelligence. A gut bracket for me is not intelligent.
Have you? I know we're talking more about like seeding and upsets. Have you talked to Tyler yet about like bracket? Have you talked to him at all about March yet? Like the madness in the brackets, like after they came out. Specifically, I want to know what he thinks about UNC getting in because I know that was like the
We
hottest
haven't had
topic.
that,
Okay,
that because that's going to be a heavy topic on today's
that makes
show. We
sense.
we save all of those sort of
I'm
conversations.
I'm excited because I can't wait to hear Tyler's take on that. I might actually go try to see if he tweeted about it first, just out of curiosity, because I know he's a hoop head too on the
Yeah, big
college
time.
side. The UNC stuff was crazy because ultimately, like, it probably won't matter much, if at all. I don't get geeked out about the playing games
No.
because if you're in a playing game, like, you're not gonna win the tournament anyways. But they're playing, I believe, San Diego State, who is another darling. A lot of people think can win a few games in a row. So, I mean, I think in terms of a playing game, that's a great one. And UNC's been hot. Their only two losses the last, I think, like 3 weeks have been to Duke twice. And I don't know. I just that'll be a fun game. Like that's a playing game that I might actually try to watch. I think
Yeah,
the big.
you have that. You have Texas and Xavier. That
Mhm.
feels like they did the first four right. It is a TV. Let's be honest. If you want to decisively make sure that you get in over UNC, you got to be decisively better. This is a TV product at the end of the day,
Yep.
and we're talking about play-in games where these teams aren't going to make it very far anyway. It's amazing to me the programs, the fan bases that cry about why didn't you let us in? Why? So you can watch your team play one more time? Two
Yeah.
more games? Come on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If you punch your ticket and you walk into the theater, but you only get to see the previews, it's probably not worth
Sometimes
the
the previews
attendance
are the
money.
best part, so I don't know that that
Yeah,
was
but
the
you
best
don't know that on
analogy.
the front end. You still want to sit through and find out on your own. Whatever. Not my greatest analogy. I think the toughest thing for me, Brandon, is, and I did this last year. Last year, I was very heavy that the SEC was by far the best conference, and I was like, I'm picking the best teams out of the best conference. And the SEC was awful in the tournament last year, upset left
Yeah.
and right. Like it was atrocious.
I think that's going to happen again.
It's tough because I feel like the SEC is even better this year, and I feel even more confident. And I'm like, no, I just went through this. So I think generally that's my biggest issue right now, is trying to kind of sift through that because there ain't no way it's going to be like there's 14 SEC teams in. It's a record. Look, we're not going to have the Sweet 16 and it be like 14 out of the 16 teams. So it's about picking the squads from that conference specifically that I believe in, that I think can play well. I do think, though, and I said this even a month ago, there's really only four teams, and I'm not usually a chalky guy. Every once in a while, there's a year where I'm like, it's going to probably be a lot of chalk. Some years, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of blood, and that's always fun for the viewers. But I think this is the type of year, and I felt this way for a month, where I look at the top four teams, and we talked about this with the odds because we were making futures bets a month ago. I don't know if I feel like any of the teams can win it outside of the one seeds this year. I really don't feel like any can. I think in terms of winning it all, now obviously it's a long bracket, but if you're talking about championships, I'm looking at Duke, who has the best player in the country, and I know Cooper Flag's been hurt, but it looks like he's going to be around. Plus, they still won the tourney without him in their conference. Houston's a juggernaut, and they're not a team that's come out of nowhere. Houston's been a very good basketball school these last 5 years or whatever it is. Looking at it, and then you know how I feel about the Gators, and even Auburn, who went out early, has been one of the best teams all year.
Well, and the odds tell you exactly that because you have Duke as the odds-on favorite at 3-1, and then Houston, the final one seed, is plus in terms of the odds rankings, plus 650. It then drops to Alabama, which is
Yeah,
the highest, is the shortest odds for any two seed or lower. They're at 16-1, so it goes from 6-1 to 16-1. The odds makers are telling you there is a clear divide between the top
agreed.
teams in the country. I think we're going to get plenty of chaos, but
Yeah,
when it all shakes out in the wash, my I did fill out a bracket. I will probably tinker with this moving forward, but my let's see if I do have this up. My final four, I have Florida playing Michigan State and Houston playing Duke. So that's 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed. Pretty chalky stuff.
and I've had years where I filled out the bracket and it's been like a 3, a 7, a 1, and a 4, and I'm like, I only want. We've seen years where one seeds have went down even before the first weekend's up, so it happens. I'm aware of it. I don't think it's going to be that type of year. I do think it's the type of year where you're going to get three, if not all four, one seeds in the final four, just because I think there's such a clear divide. But March is madness. That's why they've coined it that. And it's just that's the beauty is you don't know. And it is a gauntlet to get there. I think I'm a big fan too of paths, right, Brandon? You start to
Big
look at,
time.
well, okay, maybe all these one seeds are playing 16s that they'll probably crush, probably. But what do they have to deal with in that 8 and 9 game in round two? Who is the 2 seed in their region? Things of that nature. I think that's how I start to kind of look big picture at which one seeds might get knocked out. But ultimately, I'm not worried about that until they cross paths in the bracket. Like I'm not picking my one seeds based on what the 2 seed's going to do below until they potentially cross paths, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think one of the ones that I'm staring at now that is very path dependent is Alabama has Robert Morris. I don't think many people are going to go to the Bob Morris side. So then St. Mary's plays Vanderbilt. I'd have St. Mary's winning that one.
Yeah.
So those two. So here you have a 2 seed that I'm going to have getting knocked out in the round of 32 because St. Mary's is really good defensively, and if you can slow
Yep.
down Alabama, they're a mess. So that's just a bad path for them.
You
Whereas
know
you
what's
look at like
crazy?
the other side, I see Michigan State. It's part of the reason why I have them going far. You get Marquette has been a little uneven this year, and then the if they knock out the Lobos, then I think Michigan State has a pretty easy path. But
Yeah, I agree.
it
And
is
that
all path dependent.
and two things on that. I'm having a harder time with Vanderbilt St. Mary's than I am with whatever one of those teams plays Alabama in the second round, to be honest with you. And that's not just
Because
because
that
we're my
goes back
Gators.
to your SEC thought. You're like, Vandy should have a much better roster here, and in a one-game scenario, they can beat St. Mary's.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, you talked about coaching on your list of notes, like Izzo and March. I mean, gosh, sign me up,
To the
bud,
moon.
right?
Yep.
Like and it's one of the reasons, like, to kind of show the antithesis of that. Like, I hate Michigan's team this year. I know that they won their conference. I know they got Dusty there, right, from FAU, who's done some big things, obviously, with a lesser, I don't want to say lesser, but a harder school to win at with the Owls. Um, but like all those factors do matter, and coaching is so big. And I think that's why you're going to see a lot of people, and you brought it up a month ago, ride that St. John's train with Patino on board.
Well, and so that is my favorite sequence of the bracket right now is exactly that. St. John's has Omaha, they'll dust them. Then
Yep.
it's Kansas and Arkansas. One of those two teams is going to move on to play St. John's in round two. So you're
Yep.
guaranteed to have either have Calipari or Bill Self going up against Rick Pitino. If you're leaning
Yep.
into the coaching aspect of it and you weight that heavily as I do, good luck picking that round two matchup. That's a tough one.
Yeah, no, I agree. But that goes back to path, right? Like that's where it's tough for them. Maybe if they're flipped with one of the other 2 seeds, we're having a different conversation because I like St. John's too, but not enough to where I'm probably picking them necessarily comfortably, at least in that next round. It is super interesting, and it will be fun to kind of watch this play out. And I think this is one of the years too, because there's such a discrepancy that like it's going to make it that much harder to pick the first 2 rounds, even if you feel great about your final four and Elite Eight.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe a good practice going in, if you guys haven't filled out your brackets yet, is figure out who you think will end up playing in the Final Four, and then maybe
Yep.
build it out backwards in your own mind. Let's
And
get
the
to our
last,
go
last one
ahead.
real quick too. I know another big one that people are bringing up is Yale and A&M because Yale was able to have a huge upset over SEC last season in the brackets. And I told you this before the Super Bowl. Do not get caught up in what one team did a year ago in a scenario that even is very similar versus what's going to happen this time around. Lightning typically doesn't strike twice, is all I'll say.
If that wasn't the best transition into our Zone Heads bets for today, I don't know what is. I went a little wild last night. So I'll start with my futures wager. I met you where you already are, and you got significantly a better number than I got. I have it marked down at 10-1 for you, betting on Florida to win the national championship. So kudos to you. But I figured rather than, beat myself up over price, I was going to enter in to the swamp party plus 425. I have Florida winning the national championship. They have really rounded and they've been in great shape the whole year, but they are starting to feel a whole lot like UConn from the last 2 seasons, where I'm not sure other teams that they play are going to be able to even keep it close. They're loaded everywhere. They have everything that I look for in a tournament team when it comes to shooting, defense, size, tournament tested players, that sort of like Elijah Martin, such a huge pickup for them in the transfer portal out of FAU. So I wish that I had taken that plunge earlier. Kudos to you, but I am on Florida to win the Natty. I also have the ticket on St. John's, but that was more price related. This is sometimes you bet a number based on you think the price is good. Sometimes you bet a number because you just think it's going to happen. And that's the case with Florida for me.
Yeah, and I think like for me, I hate pulling parallels to the Super Bowl because here I am doing it. I guess I treat this more like the NFL playoffs than I realized before you and I started doing this podcast. I love chalk. I love all the ones getting to the Final Four. Even if one gets knocked off, if you still feel confident that there's a high likelihood you're going to get 3 out of 4, throw 100 on each one of those 1 seeds. I mean, the value is still in the pluses because it is bracketology, right? You're going to make money on that, assuming it isn't just complete chaos, which again, I feel very confident about. So I already have the ticket on Florida. I did put another one. So we actually have the same ticket. I just have 2 of them. And then I also threw down on the other 1 seeds because I think it's going to be chalky this year. And I think we're always looking
So
for
you have a bet on all of the 1 seeds?
I do.
Okay, I'm going to add that to the website. Futures bets also available at zoneheadsmedia.com.
Yeah, and again, I think it's because I do expect it to be chalky. I don't expect to obviously make out like a fat cat there, but like we're just grinding for dollars, man. If you know you're giving yourself a good shot to be in the green, and then that's where you can have fun, right? Like I do that, and then obviously we'll all be in our office pools and our friend pools and all that. So you're gonna have some other cheddar, but then every day I'm gonna be in it, dog. The Hard Rock Bet app has me rolling. Like I will be betting every game. I'll be parlaying. So for me, I like to really be in the moment, especially the first 2 rounds. But yeah, I feel really good about the 1 seeds and deep runs this year.
For the first round, I also have Yale plus 7.5.
I knew you were going to be that guy. You were going to be that guy. I knew it.
This was me. So the bets that I've already placed is me trying to get ahead of line movement. It's not. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some Yale expert. Okay,
but I'm with you on VCU, by the way. That was one of the ones I had in my pocket for this segment. I like the Rams, so I was with you on VCU.
I think that folks are going to be pretty heavy on Yale once they start digging into the matchup. Texas A&M is a less than perfect SEC representative here, and Yale has had success in these sort of matchups. 7.5, I think, is going to move, so I bought it now. I also like Louisville minus 2.5 against a team that historically I love to back come tournament time, but this is not the same Creighton team that we have seen in years past. They lost their top 2 scorers, and they brought in a big transfer who only played 8 games this year. So I have Louisville. I was really impressed with them at the end of the season. They're minus 2.5 in that round 1 matchup. And then I already talked about VCU as the other bet that I've already placed at plus 3 against BYU. I wouldn't be surprised if that one's close to a pick 'em by the time we get the tip off on that. So let's go.
I love it, man. Like I said, the fun's just getting started. We're just getting ramped up.
So we are going to air NCAA tournament games on at least Thursday,
Nice.
maybe Thursday and Friday on 96.9 The Game. So we'll be bumped off of the air for that. So my ass is on the couch betting like a maniac.
And a little nice note, fun fact, if you're a zone head watching and you're like, I love March Madness, next year we get first and second round in Tampa. Year after, I'm pretty sure you get it in Orlando. So I'm pretty sure we have back-to-back first round sessions here between the I-4 corridor the next 2 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for us this week on the Zoneheads podcast, presented by Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. Call him at 407-702-4635. And I just realized, Zach, Kevin, if you're watching, I'm sorry, I forgot to put your banner on the bottom of the screen. I got so ahead of myself with everything that we talked about. All right, Zach, till next week, my friend.